Hi there, in this video I'm going to be looking at this, doing a long-term test of my Lumix G9. Join me, roll credits. Well, hi YouTube, Brian James at Micro Four Thirds Guy with you once again on this beautiful sunny day here up in Cumbria, just beside the River Eden in Carlisle, and thoroughly enjoying the day. Now today I'm going to bring you a review of this. This is my Lumix G9. I've had it about 3 years now, and I bought it from a local dealership, Wilkinson's Cameras in Carlisle, as a full standard import, but only for £799 brand new. And even better than that, it came with the BGG9 battery holder. Now, I love battery grips. You've probably seen this on a few of my other videos, but I do love battery grips. It does make the camera physically larger and heavier, but I do find, especially when I was taking a lot of portrait-orientated photographs, having the camera in that position with all the controls on the top rather than having to reach over the top made things an awful lot better. And I do find that it makes the camera a lot more stable, especially if you're using a long lens. But as I say, I bought this in 2009, and at the time that I bought this, the big competition was what this video is being filmed on at the moment, which is the Olympus OMD EM1 Mark II. Now at the time this was about £1,399, so I had a huge price difference straight away, and that's without a battery grip for the Olympus. So I had a very, very big price differential there, and I wanted to see what the specs were like. And to be honest, the biggest difference for me was probably the phase detect autofocus. But it wasn't really a big issue as a stills photographer. I wasn't doing any videos at that time particularly, so my main interest was for stills. And I found that the G9 gave almost all the facilities of the EM1 Mark II, but considerably cheaper. So I bought this camera, took a bit of a punt on it. It had been out, it had some rave reviews, but that was 3-4 years ago. And things have changed a lot in the camera sector now. We've obviously got the EM1 Mark III came out, then the EM1X, or the other way around, should I say, EM1X and the EM1 Mark III. Then, of course, we've just got the OM1, and we also have gone through various iterations with the Lumix. But even with that, nothing has come out to replace the G9 as the flagship of the stills photography. But does that make it a great stills camera and nothing else? Well, to be honest, no. The G9 for me is used primarily as my video camera, and the reason is that the video facilities on this camera have been improved and improved and improved as time's gone on. But I'll come to those in a few moments. Now this video isn't about checking the spec sheets on this camera, although I will go through some of the specs. I don't go for specs too much because you can get bogged down by it. They don't necessarily reflect what the camera itself's capable of, especially when you've got it in your hand and you're using it for real. A lot of the specs do come in useful because they're the things that give the camera an edge over its competitors and also over the other cameras in the range. And it's also a really good idea to use the specs to compare the two, which I said I did with the EM1 Mark II and this. But at the time, this seemed the camera to go for. So has it been a good investment? Have I wasted my money? Well, let's have a look and see. Well, the camera itself is big. It's a big camera compared to other Micro Four Thirds cameras, and especially compared to the EM1 Mark II. But that's not really a big disadvantage to me because I came from Canon. I was shooting primarily on a 5D Mark II or a 1DS Mark III. Now, the 1DS Mark III is massive in comparison to this. So being able to get this in my hand, although it's quite a big camera with the battery grip on, is still considerably smaller. It's physically not a huge amount smaller than, say, the 5D Mark II, but the advantage of it for me is the lenses. Micro Four Thirds lenses are smaller. It's a matter of physics, you can't get around it. Micro Four Thirds lenses with the smaller sensor having to fill smaller size inside means that you can get away with smaller glass and lighter lenses because of that. And that's a huge advantage to me. So although the camera itself is quite big, the overall system makes it a really, really good system to use. So let's have a look at some of those specs as the camera sits today. And I've got my sheets of paper. I can never remember specs straight off the top of my head, so I'll have to keep on looking down at this, so forgive me on that. But this is the way that I get it right. In normal use, I find that I don't really worry about it too much. So recording wise, it has dual SD slots and both are UHS 1 or 2. So you've got fast cards in both. Real big advantage, and that was a big advantage over the EM1 Mark II in its time. It's a 20.33 megapixel sensor, so almost identical comparison to the Olympus, and a good size of sensor in that. It's the same sort of sensor as I've got same sort of size of sensors in the Olympus EM1 Mark II and also in my GX8. Well, image stabilization wise, it's between 5 and 6.5 stops. It has built-in image stabilization, but if you're using the Lumix lenses, especially the Mark II of most of their G series lenses, you'll find that you've got dual IS capability, so it's using the image stabilization in body as well as the image stabilization built into the lens. Now this is a bit of a beast when it comes to high-speed shooting, of course, because you've got the 6K and 4K, which is derived from the video side of things to give you still pictures at an enormous frame rate, and you can just go into there and pick out individual frames that you want to. Absolutely superb. Remember, 4K is equivalent roundabout to an 8 megapixel shot, so even on the smaller one it's about 8 megapixels. I think it's about 10.5 if you go to 6K, somewhere around about that. But whatever it is, it's going to give you a really useful image whatever you do, and at an enormous frame rate. Now the video specs have changed with this over different firmware updates, and I'll bring you the firmware updates in a few moments. But currently you've got 4K, you've got 30p at 60 frames a second, which is great on a camera which is effectively a stills camera. When you go to full HD, you've got 30p at 180 frames a second, which at its maximum, which again is a phenomenal frame rate. If you're doing slow motion stuff, this is great, and it takes you a lot of the way to go into something like the GH5 series or the GH6. It gives you an awful lot way on that, but still giving you a fantastic stills camera. Obviously it has both Wi-Fi and Bluetooth built in, and I find the image app software, which is available for free from the Panasonic site, really is a useful piece of software and very, very practical to use in day-to-day use. Now the eyepiece on this is 3.6 million dots. It's clear, it's clean, it's fantastic. It's a really comfortable eyepiece to use as well. And if you're a glasses user, it gives you the ability to zoom out slightly and change the magnification. So even if your eye's further away, you're still going to see the full frame on it. Very, very useful for glasses users. The only problem I find with this is you get a wonderfully clean image when you're shooting it, but when I play back, it quite often seems as if it's blurred, and it's misled me a few times into thinking that I didn't have a properly focused photograph. So I've wasted time reshooting and reshooting to try and get it right, and failing miserably at the time, only to get back, stick it into post-production and find out that the whole lot really were crisp sharp. So it's a little bit misleading on that, and I don't know if it's a problem with just this camera or the G9s in general, but I think it is the G9s in general. I think it's just the way that it actually displays its information on the screen. Maybe it's trying to cut down on processor time, I don't know. But I do find it a little bit misleading sometimes when I'm actually using the camera, and a little bit off-putting. It tends to sap your confidence somewhat. Now of course we come to the autofocus system on this, and this is the big criticism. It's contrast only, it doesn't have face detect. It does have the DFD system of course, but it does seem to be a criticism of an awful lot of shooters on this that they don't have, especially the video shooters, that they don't have face detection on the camera. Personally, I don't find much of a problem with it, but I don't push the camera to extremes either. And it is something to be aware of if you're going to be taking photos and videos on this camera, that you don't have the face detect, which of course the EM1 Mark II does. Now mechanical shutter wise, you're going up to 1/8,000th of a second on this, so you've got plenty of range on there. And it's a 2/50th of a second for your flash sync on there. So again, a really nice fast speed for flash synchronization if you're doing studio work. Using electronic shutter, you're getting up to about 32,000th of a second. So if you really want some fast stuff on there, from some fast shutter speeds, the electronic shutter will take you there. But of course there are other problems associated with using electronic shutters over mechanical. The other thing I really like on this is the high shutter life. It's got, the manufacturers say it's got a 200,000 shutter actuations between failures, which again is fantastic. That's really putting you into the pro league of cameras. Now features wise, it's got auto exposure bracketing, you've got HDR obviously standard on that, white balance bracketing, you've got focus stacking, all sorts of the fancy tools that you could need to take your shots further. A lot of it depends on which lens you're using though, if you're using the right lenses, because these don't necessarily work with all lenses, so you have to pay prior attention to that if you want to get into things like focus stacking, but they are available on the camera body. Now shutter speed in mechanical, you're talking about 12 frames a second at its maximum, but if you switch on electronic shutter, you're getting about 20 frames a second, and if you start taking it from the 6K or the 4K video, you're getting up to 60 frames a second, which is a phenomenal shutter speed. Now of course another advantage on this, you've got two high-speed SD cards in there. They're both match, you can put a high speed into either slot, which you say you can't do on EM1 Mark II. But it gives you the opportunity, if you're using those high-speed cards, to get some fantastic buffer rates. Again, just looking at this, 60 frames in RAW, it's talking about, and more than 600 in JPEG. Now, I don't think I've ever shot 600 frames at once when I've been doing normal still photography. So when you would use that, I don't know, but it does give you a phenomenal latitude, especially if you're doing sports photography or nature photography. You want to be able to get in there quickly and get something really good and store a lot of it. Now, again, on this one, you've got the pre-shoot, so it will actually capture a few seconds worth of video of shots before you press the shutter. It does it in a clever little way, because as soon as you half press the shutter down, it starts taking photographs on that. But effectively, it's giving you that pre-burst. And again, on both these cameras, it works really well, especially if you're doing something on nature where you want to be able to try and capture, say, a bird taking off, or when you're doing something sport, you want to get that moment the baseball hitter hits the ball or the cricketer catches the ball. By hitting your shutter just at the right time, you've actually captured something just before. It's a bit magic, it works. Now again, like on the Olympus, you've got the high definition mode on this one, which takes you at about 80 megapixels. And I don't use it very often. You can handhold them. You've got to be very, very steady on it to handhold it, but you can handhold it. But on a tripod, so long as you've got nothing moving in the scene, you've got some phenomenal high definition 80 megapixel shots you can get out of these cameras. Wonderful. Now the rear monitor is very, very much identical to what's on the Olympus. It's a 3-inch monitor with about 1 million dots, and it works extremely well. The touch screen on both these cameras that I'm talking about really works fantastic. So if you're using touchscreen on there, it's great. One thing I do like about this is it has the joystick on the thumb position, so that you can actually alter your focus point very, very easily. It comes as a throwback to the days when I was on DSLRs from Canon. They all had the little thumb joystick on there, so you can alter your focus point. It's been carried on to the G9, and I think it's a real bonus. And not only that, it's also on the battery grip as well, so if you're using it in portrait mode, you've still got your little joystick. Fantastic. Now for video makers, you've got both a headphone and a mic jack on this one, and they're both standard 3.5mm, which is fantastic. So it's a very adaptable camera if you're doing something like that. Full size USB 3 socket as well on the side, and a full size HDMI socket on the side, and that will put out 4K video through the HDMI socket. So if you're using an external monitor, superb on that. Now battery life on both of the cameras is about the same. On the G9, you're getting around about 380 to 400 frames that you can take just with the battery, with the camera full on. If you start to use some of the power saving modes, you can get up to 900 shots out of a single battery. Again, if you're using the battery grip, then it does double up, because it'll automatically switch between batteries for you, so you don't get that horrible thing where you've run out of battery in the middle of a good shot. Now if you're enjoying this video, don't forget, hit the subscribe button below if you want to subscribe to the channel. I'd really love you to subscribe and join the club of all of us, 5,200 people who are subscribed to the channel now. Thanks to you all. And if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. In fact, even if you don't like the video, give it a thumbs up, because it helps YouTube spread its algorithms further to get the video seen by more. And again, if you have enjoyed it, there's a little PayPal link if you want to buy me a cup of coffee or something. Really appreciate it. Now keep on watching as well until the end, because I'm going to be giving you my actual views on whether I've enjoyed using the camera and whether I think it was a good or a bad purchase. But before I get there, let's have a little look at what I said about firmware. Now the firmware on this camera is it's been fantastic the way that Lumix have done the firmware update. Effectively, I've had 2 brand new cameras, in my opinion, since I bought the original one. So what do I mean by that? Well, when I bought the original camera, I was still on version 1.x of firmware, and the camera was good. It was rated as being absolutely fantastic in its class when it came out. It really was a market beater. But over time, things change. Improvements come along, and not long after I bought the camera, they released version 2 of the firmware. So what did they do on version 2 of this firmware? Well, a huge amount. You can see the list there. There's a huge long list of things just on version 2 and the update. It was very much like getting a brand new camera with the improvements on it. It was like going for the new model, but of course still having the original camera in my hand. The firmware updates are of course free, and just to give you an idea what was on this, and again I'm going to have to look at the notes, because it things like giving you better compatibility with Pro Photo wireless system. So if you're a Pro Photo user, much better facilities on that for use on there. Vastly improved autofocus. The autofocus really did get better by improving on the face, body, eye and animal detect on the autofocus. It had focus picking available on any autofocus mode. It'll give you all sorts of things. Video features went through the roof. It really made it something of a video camera rather than just a stills camera. And a lot of what had been on the GH5 was imported onto the G9. Really vast improvement on what it would do insofar as frame rates and insofar as what it would do in resolution. And you'd have to look, it got you into 10-bit recording as well. That all came in with version 2. The high resolution mode had been added, with a mode 2 that is, which took care of an awful lot of the blur, so you could handhold in high resolution mode. There's all sorts of things being done onto it, which again you'd have to look at the list. Better stability, the Eyepiece inside was greatly improved on that, and that was a vast improvement. But I think the biggest improvement was probably the video function. So if you're a videographer, previously you might have dismissed the G9 because it was purely a stills camera. Afterwards it became one of the best video cameras on the market, in my opinion, in this price range. And for me, this is my go-to camera when I'm doing videos. Now there were various other bug fixes after that, but again the next one was last year, 2021. Version 2.4 came out, and again version 2.4 was a major step change for me. Uploading that one, again, as I say, free, that gave you all sorts of improvements to the AF, again with human and animal recognition being improved. Again, more added video functions, including one of the best things for me is a red frame around the screen when you're recording. If you're recording yourself on this, just seeing that red screen is much easier to see. Absolutely fantastic. There were other bits and pieces, including the fact that it would be recognised by a PC on the USB mode in far better ways. So a lot of improvements came with the firmware. And if you haven't done the updates, I think we're up to version 2.6 now, which is the 5 and 6 are mainly bug fixes. But if you haven't done the firmware updates on your camera, has a link below. Just have a look below. There's a link onto the Lumix website. Just click on that. It takes you straight to the firmware page. Just do the firmware updates. And there's also a video, if you want to have a look above, I'll put a link as to how to do those firmware updates. I did that last year. It's straightforward, it's easy, and it makes a brand new camera out of the equipment you already physically own. So what about it? This sub £1,000 camera, what about it? What did I think of it? Well, as I said first, I actually wasn't as knocked out as I thought I would be. Again, a lot of what that was down to the EVF, which looked fantastic, but it didn't give me the results I expected. Sharpness when I was playing back video files and photographs that I saw. But as I say, that all came back in post-production, so I wasn't losing anything. It was just a little bit of a red herring. The camera itself, though, is fabulous. It is big, yes, for a Micro Four Thirds, and that's going to pull in some criticism. But it feels so good in the hand. It's got a wonderfully big, large grip on it, even without the battery box. I'll take the battery off it, actually, because it just unscrews. But even without that on, the camera itself is a nice, chunky camera. The grip is fantastic. The eyepiece, when you're using it, is superb. The whole camera is easy to use, and the menu system is superb as well. Would I buy it again? Without doubt, and especially at the price I bought it. They have gone up a bit since then, but to be honest, it's still a bargain, and I still can't say that the EM1 Mark III beats it in any way, shape or form either. One thing that it does share with the EM1 Mark III, which I really love, is the fact that you can actually charge up through the USB on this straight into the camera. You don't have to use the battery charger. It does come with a battery charger separate with it, but if you plug a USB 3 cable into this, it will plug straight from that cable, so you can actually charge this. And I use that a lot when I'm going between shoots. I'll plug it into the car's power source, and I'll just do it, just take it straight off the power supply in the car, straight on the charger on this, and by the time I get to my next destination, I've got another recharged battery. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, as I say, just please leave a subscription below and give me a tick in the notifications if you want to receive notifications every time we upload these videos. And as I say, a big thumbs up really would come in useful, because it helps YouTube spread the algorithms further. But until the next time, this is Brian James saying enjoy your photography, enjoy taking photographs, and have fun. Bye bye.